Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone is having a fantastic day. Congratulations on making it through the first half of the week. And I hope that you and your family and your friends are safe. And if not, I really do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's a ton of stuff happening throughout the world today. A lot of it has to deal with Ukraine, and it's not just inside of Ukraine, but on an international scale. Overall, today was very heavily focused on Ukraine and crises going on because of Ukraine. A lot of statements being made. So, luckily, we have a lot of stuff for you there, especially for those that are interested specifically in the war. But don't worry, we have other topics that we're covering throughout the world as well. There's a ton of stuff happening throughout the world. There's a ton of not really good stuff happening throughout the world, and a lot of that can be attributed to the war in Ukraine and the ripple effects that are caused by it, but a lot of it's caused by other things such as global warming and environmental issues and conflicts going on around the world, terrorism. You can attribute these to a great deal of many things, and there's a lot of people that are suffering. But luckily, you guys have made this an awesome community, and we're allowed to be the news that can give back. That is why, this whole project exists, because we want to be able to give back directly to the people affected by the news that we talk about here every single day. So this channel will never, ever do super chats. We're never doing any kind of merchandising. The reason being is because 100% of everything we do is going to be going to help charities and organizations throughout the world to help people. If you check out in the video description, you're going to see a ton of different links for a ton of different locations. And a lot of that has to deal with Ukraine because, of course, that is the big topic right now. But, of course, there are other locations as well, whether or not you're talking about Africa, especially the Horn of Africa right now, or you're talking about Southeast Asia, and we are constantly looking for more. So please be sure to get onto our Discord or get onto our website. The links are also in the description below. Discord's probably the best for us, and you can go on there and you can check out and you can actually send and talk to some of the staff here that we have on board with us, and we can actually send us more links. Please send us more links. We're constantly looking to add to that. We have a constant list on both our Discord and our website as well as here. We go through and we vet each of these independently. So we actually go through their financial records. We take a look at what they do. We go through all the different things like Charity Navigator and stuff, of course, to help us get a head start on that. But please, send us more. We vet these for your protection. The best protection, of course, is yourself. So we highly encourage you to do your own research on internet fraud as well and to investigate these as well on your own. But another important piece is that 80% or more of all donations of the organizations that we are listing go directly to helping people. 80% of what they receive go to helping people, as opposed to a vast majority going to helping other, whether that's paying salary or administration's costs. No, we are here to help people. We want to have a direct impact on these people. So every organization, 80% or more goes directly to helping individuals through their programs. 20% or less, and significantly emphasized on the or less part, actually goes to paying for salary and administration's costs. So be sure to check out the description. Make sure to give those organizations some love. That is why we're here. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's fine. Give us a like and subscribe and let your friends know about us, because the more people that come here and join us, the more people, of course, can enjoy the way that we do the news. But most importantly, the more people that are here, the more of a important impact we can make on people's lives throughout the world. So that's what the goal of the project is. Eventually, we even want to be able to put donations directly onto this stream, so that way we can do fundraising on the streams themselves. So thank you for supporting us, and thank you for supporting those organizations. But without further ado, we're going to dive right into the news, starting with our special report ongoing here in Ukraine. And the first major thing we have here is, of course, you know what a golden paw means, and that is another Patron update. So Patron is this absolutely adorable little bomb-sniffing dog. I mean, absolutely adorable. Please join the cult of Patron. We have cookies. It's fantastic. There's like weekly book club meetings. Anyway, getting off of that sidetrack, there is a ton of stuff that he has been given. He is loved by children across Ukraine, and a lot of what he does, on top of being a normal bomb-sniffing dog, he's found about 300, somewhere between 300 and 400 different pieces of munitions, unexploded ordnance that was left behind both in the Chernihiv Oblast and in the Kiev Oblast. And he goes on tour basically to children's hospitals and to different locations throughout Ukraine that is relatively safe. And he actually goes on tour, and he's used as a tool to help teach kids, which love this dog just as much as I do, to teach them, how to can keep them engaged in classes on what to do if you find an exploded ordnance. Because the sad reality is that the amount of ordnance that's been fired by both sides in this war means that a lot of this is undetonated. It's not detonated. It's unexploded ordnance. And the Rasputitsa mud that we saw early in the war, especially up here in the north, made it especially susceptible to being duds. A lot of these require a crush switch. Basically, they have a crush switch on the very front of their of the ordnance, and once they land, that impact on hard ground or a hard surface crushes the front of the munition and sets off the explosive. Rasputitsa mud, which literally will sink tanks and people inside of it, obviously does not mean that there's a hard surface for those to detonate against. So a lot of these just get swallowed up. On top of just your normal duds that are within these older Soviet stockpiles anyway, and as well as purposefully booby trapping, setting landmines, hand grenades just not going off, just the general stuff of war. And that's going to affect Ukraine for decades. So this is something that needs to be taught to these children now because, realistically, an adult who's already at risk just because, the average adult civilian isn't thinking about this stuff every day, usually, or shouldn't be. And the children who especially don't know right from, relatively right from wrong when it comes to this kind of stuff are especially at risk. So, but he was awarded anyway. Petron was awarded a diploma from the Veterans of Foreign Wars as well as a challenge coin from the Bomb Techs Without Borders. And we actually have a photo set here for y'all. I mean, come on. How can you not love this face? This is a good way to start. I mean, come on. He's absolutely adorable. I mean, he's got a little toy here. This is the most adorable dog. I swear. He is the goodest boy. And there he is while he's being awarded by the Veterans of Foreign Wars. And there is the VFW. There is the actual VFW little diploma that he got. So, pretty cool. I mean, he's gotten all sorts of awards thus far, and he continues to get them, and that's for good reason. He is one of the goodest boys. As we jump over here into Kharkiv, though, it's a lot less on a high note when we start. And that's because immediately once you start moving towards that battlefield, things drastically get worse, usually speaking. Here in Kharkiv, Kharkiv is no longer tactically or strategically important for the Russians. Their artillery is no longer in range, and any chances they had of taking this city, really, those went away as soon as Ukrainian forces pushed them out of artillery range. Kharkiv, for the most part, was encircled for much of the duration of this war, up until about a month and a half ago, almost 2 months ago, when Ukrainian forces conducted a counterattack in the Kharkiv Oblast that was extremely successful and ended up pushing the Russians away to the point that it's no longer viable for artillery to even strike it with normal ordnance. What this means is that Russian forces have resorted to launching Iskander-M missiles from around the Belgorod region, whether that's closer to the front lines, and as well, we do know that they are launching just outside of Belgorod proper, and they are firing them directly into Kharkiv that has caused an immense amount of damage and loss of civilian life. And what we see is that just continues. We have another incident here where Kharkiv was once again struck with more Iskander-M missiles and artillery systems earlier tonight.
Пиздец. Еще раз. Еще раз. Еще. Еще.
Это далеко.
So obviously they're trying to film out their window. I probably wouldn't be rushing to go film this stuff either, knowing the dangers of this. But that is just the reality is that every single day, in fact, we've heard from Russian sources on the opposite side of the border in Belgorod, you're like, there it goes, another starts in the morning, 6 to 8 more missiles headed towards Kharkiv. I mean, it's ridiculous, and there's no point to it anymore. It's essentially a waste of munitions. They're not hitting strategic targets. They're not hitting tactically important targets on the battlefield. If you're going to do that, hit the Ukrainian forces and their ammunition depots that are closer to the front lines, that are actually a danger to your troops. Free your troops up and actually get them to move somewhere that puts you in a more advantageous position than being on the back foot. They're not doing that. They're not wanting to do that. The point of hitting Kharkiv is really why it really emphasizes why people are more and more calling to consider Russia a terror state-sponsored terrorism. That is what a lot of people are calling for at this point, and that is kind of what we see here really emphasized in what's happening in Kharkiv. Then that's the unfortunate reality of what this war has turned into. As you jump over here to Lysychansk, there has been some chatter amongst Russian communities that, the Russian forces destroyed a HIMAR. I hate to break it to you, if you've seen any of those rumors, those are false. Because what that stems from is, no, there have been no HIMARs destroyed. In Lysychansk, Russian forces, who are currently going through and mopping up the rest of the area and seeing what they've destroyed or captured or killed, have currently found over here an M777A2 artillery gun that was fixed to the Oshkosh M1083 A1P2 MTV, which is a U.S. Army usually standard kind of logistical truck that they use. It's built by Oshkosh. It can carry up a maximum capacity of 5 tons. And this is a very similar front end design to what you see on the HIMARS platform, to the actual chassis of the vehicle, not necessarily the weapon system itself. So when you see this, if you don't know the whole picture, which we're getting ready to show you, so you take a look here. So this is what people saw in this picture. Then this looks like a HIMARS if you focus on just this. But you can see the artillery gun here in the back. This thing is actually hitched to the vehicle. It's in its hitched configuration. It's ready to be towed away. This must have been struck by an artillery piece as this thing was getting ready to move out. And it's just utterly destroyed. That's not the only thing. We can see the actual artillery battery once again pointed out here. And you can actually see the whole length of the weapon system here. Pretty much the whole length of the barrel here. That's buried underneath all of this rubble. And they actually had a video of this as well. So there you go. So if you do end up seeing these rumors from anybody, as you're going about your day or whatever, you can now tell if you say, if you hear, hey, Russia destroyed a HIMARS. That's not true whatsoever. It's false, and now you know why. I saw that on some Russian chatter earlier, and I wanted to make sure that that was cleared up. Because I have a feeling if it's not already a big topic, it will become a big topic here soon, especially as we've seen the effective capability of HIMARS, which we will be getting to here in a moment. And so, as we actually move down here, unfortunately, we do have an update here in Chasiv Yar, where a Russian missile ended up collapsing an entire 5-story apartment complex. That death toll has once again risen today. This is coming from the Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs. So far, 47 people have been found dead, including 1 child. 9 people have been removed alive from the destruction thus far. They have rescued 9 living people so far, but work is still currently ongoing. They still do not know how many people are currently underneath the rubble. The newest update regarding this actually broke at 10 a.m. local time when they found yet another corpse, unfortunately. And we do have the actual post from the Ministry of Internal Affairs here coming from Ukraine. So that is the newest update regarding Chasiv Yar. One notable individual, an Olympic dancer for dance sport champion within Ukraine was actually residing in this apartment complex amongst the other dead as well. So pretty massive strike. It's probably going to go up there as to being one of the larger collateral, quote unquote, strikes. Same thing, much like Kremenchuk, the death toll here has skyrocketed rather significantly since we initially reported it. As we move over here into Horlivka, we can actually see another logistical depot was targeted by Ukrainian forces. This time it would appear that it's targeted by regular standard artillery pieces as opposed to those HIMARS systems, but it seems that they were actually hitting a depot here inside of Horlivka, and it seems that it was relatively successful. We can go ahead and take a look here. Short clip, but it would appear that there's pretty massive artillery usage here near Horlivka that is rather consistent to what we're seeing along the front lines, and we're seeing that pretty much everywhere within Ukraine. Decades apart, but together in spirit is what I have titled this, and this is from the very same photo that you might recognize if you were here to see the thumbnail of the video. And these are two very haunting photographs. These were posted by the Defense Ministry of Ukraine, and these are two girls, one of them being from World War II and one of them being from the war in Ukraine, that show exactly the same picture. And that is that children are heavily affected by this war. So there's a little girl here in a bombed out Ukraine during World War II holding her doll. And once again, we see that replayed once again here in color in the 21st century here right in Ukraine once again as the Russian forces continue to bombard these locations. Children are extremely at risk when it comes to this war. There's a lot of kids inside of Ukraine. A lot of them haven't been able to flee. And unfortunately, a lot of them are caught up inside of these war zones. The majority of child casualties of this war have occurred in the Donetsk Oblast. And it's a pretty significant amount of them. I would say about 2/3 of child casualties of the war occurred in the Donetsk Oblast. And that number will only increase. And that's the ones that we know about. That number will only increase as places like the statistics coming from Mariupol become more refined as we find out more and more information as to what happened there. And, you know, God willing, that the Ukrainian forces actually retake Mariupol, it can properly exhume and forensically investigate those mass graves that have been produced in the local dumps and everything else around there to give us a much more accurate picture than what I think we would be getting from the Russian side of things. But it's very telling when you look at these two photographs together. This is extremely telling as to what is happening in this war and who it's affecting. Ultimately, are soldiers affected on the battlefield? Yes, but we also expect that. We don't expect this brutality against children. As we move over here, it would appear that the Russians, on top of going through and trying to consolidate their holdings here inside of Ukraine, we're seeing them also begin to fortify their locations here inside of Ukraine as well. Russian logistical vehicles are spotted carrying very small concrete pillboxes, essentially, that can be easily deployed as defensive positions wherever need be, whether that's at a roadblock or along a defensive line. And this seems to be one of those indicators that Russia probably isn't going to be able to conduct large-scale offensives going forward to a massive extent, but we will be able to see them trying to at least solidify their holdings of what they have so far maintained and what they are able to try and take in the future. We'll probably see them trying to put in a much more defensive posture as they start to running out of things such as artillery shells, as the logistics become essentially completely disrupted, and as we start to see where manpower is becoming even more of an issue than we already see it being. So we can go ahead and take a look at this. So, in regards to child casualties, so Demise FPS asks, since 2014 or since February 24, 2022. Just the casualties since the 24th. The child casualties, last I checked, were at 632 child casualties. That's coming from the General Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine. And that is kind of where they're sitting now. They're only talking about since the invasion when we're talking about child casualties. That doesn't include, since 2014, which would that would exacerbate that number quite significantly. The number of casualties so far since 2014, especially while the fighting did seem to die down there leading up into this war, and it came to a stalemate thanks to Russian forces supplying the small group of separatists that were actually fighting. And it would appear probably also Russian nationals coming over to fight on the side of those separatists. There were extremely high casualties because of that. And we also see M113s going into action now. M113s, we've seen them before in action. It's just nice. It's a nice refresher to see them again. These are U.S.-built M113 armored personnel carriers. They were first developed and heavily utilized during the Vietnam War. They saw extensive action clear up until the Gulf War and the war in Iraq. And they continue to see extensive action as they are a rather versatile armored personnel carrier. They do have some drawbacks as a vehicle. Specifically, they are well noted for having thin armor on the bottom of the vehicle. So you'll still see Ukrainian troops riding on the top of the vehicle as they're used to doing with others, such as the BMP, the BMD, and the BTR. That's just all pretty commonplace. Most of these vehicles just don't have that thick armor plating, and being a flat bottom hull, it really doesn't have a chance to spread out the blast wave in an explosion, and all of it is just going to end up forcing its way up into the crew compartment. But we do see them being used much more frequently now, and it's just nice to see them out and about. So let's go ahead and take a look. So just a nice little cozy, quick video. But their M113 is numerable. There is a ton of them, so they'll be able to continue to supply those for some time, and they'll prove very useful for Ukrainian forces. Visible confirmation. So the cool thing about the war in Ukraine is the amount of stuff you can find to help you. We're obviously a very small channel. We do not have things like access to Maxar satellite, live Maxar satellite footage, as many things do. Many places will. But that costs thousands of dollars that we just can't invest. I'm sorry, but what we can do is there is a public thing, and it's called the NASA Firm satellite. You might know this, but this is a fire satellite. Basically, what it does is it was put up by NASA, and it detects heat signatures across the planet. Its main purpose was actually to see wildfires and be able to track wildfires, their growth, using satellites. And this thing is extremely sensitive. It will even pick up coal fires that are happening because coal is heavily used in Kaliningrad. It's very cool. But something that, as a side effect of that, has happened is now we can, in general, get a general picture of the war in Ukraine through these fires, because every burning vehicle, every hit in a field that ignites the wheat growing there, every single one of those is producing heat. Every house that's on fire. Every fire that's burning in Mariupol is someone's trying to cook their food because they have no gas or anything else there. All of that is being picked up by the satellite. And in the last 6 days, something very important has happened. So we can go ahead and take a look at this. This is something that I got shown. So this top picture here is from the 6th of July. This shows you what this indicates is a massive amount of artillery usage, on the 6th of July. These are lots of raging fires. This basically is the outline of the front lines. For all intents and purposes, this is where the front lines are at, generally speaking. Somewhere in here, that is artillery shells going back and forth one way and the other. We know that Russia is fielding a massive amount more artillery than Ukraine could probably dream of doing. realistically speaking, statistically speaking. But with that, they're producing an immense amount of firepower. Over the last 6 days, what we've seen is a massive amount of strikes by HIMARS on Russian artillery positions and Russian command posts and Russian ammunition depots and fuel depots. They no longer have the logistics or the command and control structure to be operating effectively with their artillery batteries. That is what this indicates. Because if you look down here at the 12th, it's a very different picture than what you see here up on the 6th. In 6 days, Ukraine, using its artillery, using its new HIMARS systems, which, remember, a HIMARS system can fire its missile and it will land within 1 meter of its intended target. Meaning that they have been putting these missiles directly on target, and they have been destroying ammunition depot after ammunition depot after ammunition depot. We're reporting on about 3 or 4 a day. And now we see the effects of that. The Russian artillery, they're burning through their ammunition. And they can't keep up that rate of fire because it's taking longer for those trucks to get to them to resupply. They're using those realistically, when you're destroying an ammunition depot, it's a fraction of the ammunition. It's not a dent in the ammunition in the Russian stockpile when you destroy a huge ammunition depot. But now, those same trucks that were doing short trips to resupply you now have to drive longer. They have to burn more fuel. That takes longer amounts of time. And now you're also having to probably carry less, so that way you can, maintain some kind of regulation between the supplies you're carrying. You're trying to probably also carry now a massive amount of other supplies that were stockpiled there, medical supplies, food, water, regular ammunition, not just artillery shells, but, ammunition for everyone's rifles, batteries. All of this stuff has to come out. Like, troops have to eat, they have to drink, they have to, they have to treat themselves if they're wounded. And now Russia, it's taking longer for them to get there. It's less frequent. They're burning more supplies doing it, and they can carry less with them. That is the goal. And you see this on this map, where command and control is in place. Those supply lines are there. Their stockpiles are going. They're moving equipment in a logistical. They have a logistical infrastructure in some way, shape, or form set up here that is relatively supplying their forces pretty well. Down here, those have been destroyed. They can't supply their troops, so they can't fire as often, and they can't coordinate their fires and put them in big concentrations like they are here because there is no command. They were killed. So that is what we're seeing. But I will say, if you are going by the firm's map and the firm satellite, please be aware this doesn't give you an accurate picture of what's happening on the ground. And nothing individually is going to. We as viewers are never going to fully understand the situations occurring on the ground. There could be a multitude of things that are causing this pause. It could be, or the lack of flame. For instance, it could be that the harvest is ongoing, so a lot of what would be burning has been harvested, with these fields in the south, or it has already been burned, which means it's not going to burn again if it was hit. So it's not going to cause a huge fire if you do that. Same thing, it could be because they're taking a tactical pause. It could be because they do have destroyed logistical infrastructure, command and control. It could be all of those factors combined. So it's not a true indicator, but it kind of leads you into the right direction. And that amount of lack of activity compared to simply 6 days ago is a very good indicator for Ukraine that what they're doing is working. As we jump over here into ZAPORIZHZHIA, we get into today's news, today's big news story, which is the fact there was a massive Russian missile strike here in ZAPORIZHZHIA itself, ZAPORIZHZHIA proper. This missile strike hit a local enterprise today. We don't have a lot of clarification on this situation. We know of at least 14 people were injured in the blast. I did see pictures of these individuals who were injured. It was rather gory, so I did not want to show that here on this channel. But there are pictures out there of these wounded individuals. They just look done with the war, by the way. If you're wondering what their look on their face, they're just done with this war. They are bloodied, they are covered in dust, and they don't care. They don't care about they are just done with this war. Just that is the look of their face. But we do have some of this here. So this is the initial photo that is of the missile strike here as it slammed into Zaporizhzhia. A massive missile strike. There's a very large ordnance. And we also can see here some of the destruction.
Это Элис, блядь. Это Элис, нахуй, ебаный, блядь. Вот что, блядь. Ебать копать, я только, сука, минуту назад только там стоял, нахуй. Я хуею, блядь. Пиздец, блядь. Это дыра, нахуй, блядь. Я ебнуться можно, блядь. Охуеть, блядь. Пидорасы ебаные, сука. Вы там, сука, сдохли, пидоры, блядь.
So while that is the big story tonight, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot more that's coming out in the following a few hours and days. Simply, there just isn't a lot of information about this. This is very new. This is a very large strike. Obviously, we can see that there's an immense amount of damage. We know that 14 people are injured. We don't know how many have been killed, if any. There's just not a lot of information. But it is a major strike in Zaporizhzhia, which, for the most part, has, I'd say, relatively remains unscathed thus far by Russian long-range missile strikes like this. Wouldn't say entirely, but it's definitely not seeing the amount of destruction, say, Kharkiv has, or Lysychansk, or Severodonetsk, Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, or any of those. Mykolaiv, Zaporizhzhia, has been a relative safe haven, and that seems to have quickly been swept away today. But none of these missiles or anything are going to stop the Ukrainian farmers from harvesting their fields amidst the global food shortage and amidst, everything else going underway. These Ukrainian farmers are going to harvest their crops regardless. They do not care. And man, when I say they do not care, they do not care. Not even Russian missiles are going to stop them. This guy just lugged it out of his field. So it does have copyright music. I'm sorry about that. But look at this. This guy just got out of his combine. He's just gonna... Oh, it's just an unexploded missile. Just what's left. I'm just gonna lug this out of my field. Yeah, doesn't care. Nope. He's harvesting that grain. It's happening. As we jump down here into Nova Kakhovka, we can see the after. So we can see before and after. So the Russian Federation said that the Ukrainians killed a bunch of civilians, damaged a bunch of homes for nothing because all they did was they destroyed a bunch of saltpeter. Saltpeter is a fertilizer that in and of itself is not explosive. It has to have a reducing agent to be explosive. So it's not something like a missile will hit this fertilizer and it will just massively explode. It's not ammonium nitrate. It's completely different. It's purposely built so it doesn't explode like ammonium nitrate. And I hate to tell you, but this doesn't look like fertilizer at all. So yeah, does that look like fertilizer to you? This is from inside the warehouses before the strike occurred. This is why they struck the warehouses. Because idiots like this, thankfully, considering they're on the Russian side, like to take videos. And what does videos do? It allows you to geolocate someone's position when they upload it to the internet. Congratulations, stupid. You just killed you and all of your friends. Because that is what happens when you use the internet in a war zone. There's a reason why when big things happen, No one can talk to their family overseas because there's something called River City. It's called going into River City if you're in the United States. What going into River City means is that all connection with the outside world is completely cut off. So, yeah, don't do that. And also, we have more. Here's the immediate aftermath of yesterday's strike, which, by the way, the blast of this strike was so large and so bright, it overloaded the imaging camera for NASA's VERS satellite in space.
Ебать, пошел. Техника. Пошел, ебать, пацаны. Минное поле нахуй.
By the way, does any of this look like fertilizer to you?
Как отсюда выйти, ебать. Сусь, нахуй. Ебаный рот. Вот это конченая, сука. Интересно просто. Пиздец. Да. Ебать. Пиздец. Просто пиздец.
Yeah, guys, it was just a ton of saltpeter, just this unexplodable this is unexplodable, fertilizer that wouldn't have detonated in the first place. That's all this was. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Robert Schalk, 152 millimeter saltpeter canisters. Duh. Yeah, no kidding, right? Oh wow, that's a lot of cans of saltpeter you just had lying around there, Russia. That's probably wasn't safe since it's so explosive to begin with. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. But don't worry, because there's a part 2 Electric Boogaloo. Another ammunition depot hit here. Another large fire was visible lighting up the night sky here in Nova Kakova less than 48 hours after this last attack. And it seems to be another major ammunition depot that may have been struck by Ukrainian forces. However, this time we didn't receive a report of an initial explosion. It just seems to have been a fire that got out of control, which means that someone was probably smoking in a no smoking zone. So, but it could have been. We just don't have anything to confirm that Ukrainians did indeed strike this. This just could be that guy. But regardless, this is an ammunition depot going up in flames. Initially, when we found this, there wasn't anything to say that it was exploding, obviously, because it's a picture. We can see the fire raging over there. But the video came out shortly before the stream. Go ahead and take a look at this.
Салют же. Ну я ж не дурак.
Все, стой. А чё, ходуном ходит? Подожди.
Да, балкон ходуном ходит. Я себе.
William Young, fantastic comment. Absolutely fantastic comment. When Ivan accidentally lights his own fireworks horde while smoking. Whoops. This is a big whoops. Wait, no, this isn't fireworks, guys. Wait, this isn't fire. This is saltpeter fertilizer. Remember, it's saltpeter is highly, highly explosive. For some inconceivable reason, they kept all of the reducing agent that was required to make this explosive next to the fertilizer. Okay? So when Ivan lit a cigarette and accidentally knocked that canister of reducing agent over, and it soaked all of this fertilizer, okay, it just led to a really, really bad time, okay? There's a lot of 152 millimeter canisters of saltpeter laying in that warehouse. There's no ammunition, though. Okay, no, none. Just remember that. So, part 2 Electric Boogaloo here in Nova Kakova. And that is actually it for everything here in Ukraine. By the way, folks, please feel free to ask questions. I am more than willing to answer them. I don't say that very often. Obviously, a lot of people do still ask questions, though. But, yeah, please go ahead and ask them. I'll be more than willing to try and answer to my best capability. But with that being the end of everything inside of Ukraine, we're going to go ahead and move on to all of the international news we have going on, most of which is focused on Ukraine still. There is a ton of stuff coming out today. And of course we start up here in Mother Russia with all of its infinite wisdom up here. Did I mention these people invaded Ukraine? They're also doing like a 1v32 essentially, but that's a war you're gonna win. But anyway, take a look at this. Another political dissenter has been removed. Russian authorities arrested a Moscow municipal deputy and incarcerated him until his trial. Ilya Yashin, a municipal deputy of Moscow, was arrested after making a YouTube video dissenting against the views of the official Russian Federation rhetoric regarding what occurred in Bucha. He pleaded not guilty, but the court found that he should be put in jail and incarcerated until his trial actually begins in September the 12th. He's currently being incarcerated for spreading fakes against the Russian army. And we get this directly from RT themselves. RT is a Russian state-run media news organization, as there is no longer any kind of independent news media inside of Russia. So everything is controlled by the state or influenced by the state in a very large scale. It's essentially just an authoritarian military state at this point. This guy does not care. This is not a man who has a care in the world as to what's coming to him. And you can see back here, the cop standing behind him is very disappointed. But yeah, he's just smiling for the camera. He's okay with this. That's not the only crazy thing that's happened. Well, that's not really crazy. We've watched Putin put away political adversaries for the last, 20 years that he's been in power. But the Russian Federation really would not like to lose its veto inside of the Security Council within the United Nations. In fact, there's been a large call for reform for some time now, and with the Russian Federation vetoing pretty much any resolution regarding to Ukraine when it comes to Security Council, those calls have only grown. And now the UN General Assembly has been called to discuss revisiting how the makeup and how the UN Security Council actually works. They want to conduct some reforms within it. And Russia, in its statements today, I'm just going to read this, actually. I tried to summarize, but I think it's better to hear it yourself. Given huge political relevance on the issue of the Security Council reform, we should keep looking for a solution that should enjoy support of a lot more member states than the formerly required 2/3 majority. A consensus would be the best option. Because Russia knows that they are probably about to lose their veto in the Security Council. They also know that they are probably also not going to get a consensus if it went that way. As you can tell, Russia wouldn't like to maintain their veto. That is probably not going to happen because it just requires a 2/3 vote, and that's in the UN Charter. So, yeah, that's not happening. But Russia will try its best regardless. Aravish Chang says, what are the chemical compounds of these explosives? I said, of course, our mod said I wouldn't look it up unless you want a federal agent busting down your door. Aravish Chang responded, I'm just wondering how close those are to fireworks we are seeing. They're extra spicy fireworks, Aravis. They're extra spicy. Really spicy. They are the General Tso's gone wrong of extra spicy fireworks. Okay? And of course, this one is frustrating to me. Obviously, if you haven't picked up already and you're new to this channel, we have a bias for Ukraine. And that bias is not built off of the fact that I happen to be a Westerner. In fact, I don't care. I question my own government in a lot of reasons. I worked for my government, so I know how screwed up things can be. But you only see as a viewer about 10 to 25% of what's actually out there that we actually sift through. We have over 200 individual independent sources that we go through every single time we do this stream, and that number continues to grow every single day. In fact, I actually found out that the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republics actually has a Ministry of Foreign Affairs Twitter. In case you were ever wondering, they have a Twitter. It's an official Twitter for them. But that was one that we found today. So that continues to grow every single day. And a lot of it, unfortunately, is very gory. It's not a lot of stuff. There's not a lot of confirmation we can make from it. There's just not a lot of news that we can really put together, or we need more details before we can say, that makes sense, or, there's a reasonable likelihood that this has occurred. And so you're only seeing about 10 to 25%. A lot of it, though, is a lot of blood and gore and things that YouTube won't let me show you, and I don't think you need to see to understand. That's stuff that really people who live through it should only be seeing, and not just the general public. This isn't the channel for that to begin with. I highly encourage you to go somewhere else if that's what you're looking for from this channel. I purposely go out of my way to make sure that's not what we are emphasizing on. And it's very frustrating. So that's where our bias comes from when you see this day in and day out so much and in such quantity. And it's insane. So please keep that in mind. We tried to go into this with an open mind when we started this channel, and we continue to try and do those, but we want to at least plainly state, because a lot of places will not plainly state that we do have a bias for Ukraine, despite wanting to maintain an unbiased view or an apolitical view on essentially all topics. So please bear that in mind. We just could not morally support Russia at any justification. Demise FPS stated, I don't understand. So Russian veto power is being removed. There are general reforms that a lot of nations have called for regarding the UN Security Council, especially when you talk about the Big Five, which are the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, each of which have a veto that can automatically override any kind of decision being made by the UN Security Council. Doesn't matter if everyone is for it except for one member. And as long as that member is a permanent member of the UN Security Council that will always take that seat, they will always, and I do mean always, have the power to stop and block that. That's what happened when the UN Security Council met on this issue. When Russia actually went to war in Ukraine on the 24th of February, I was watching, and this is about 10 p.m. at night, I was watching the UN Security Council live here on YouTube when it all occurred, and Russia vetoed the resolution. Not that it was necessary anyway, because the war had already started. Russia has done that multiple times throughout this entire time. Anytime there's anything being said, trying to condemn the Russian Federation, trying to come to a resolution on the Russian Federation and their invasion of Ukraine, they have vetoed. That has I say exacerbated quite often now, but that has increased the calls for reform within the UN Security Council that were already there before this war even started. And so that is now being put to the UN General Assembly because it's seen as it's needed now more than ever to actually have those reforms and have meaningful change in how the UN Security Council operates. And that those changes require a 2/3 majority vote of the General Assembly, and that's by the UN Charter. So effectively, that would revoke the veto of any, of the permanent members of the United Nations. I don't know the resolution information. I don't have the draft resolution in front of me. I'm sure if we go to the UN website, I'm sure we may be able to find it, since it has been tabled. But I probably wouldn't fully understand it unless I read through it quite a bit and did some research. But that is essentially what we're looking at. And Russia doesn't want to lose their power. They want to be able to block resolutions against them, because those resolutions could be UN binding resolutions, international law for them. Being a member of the UN, they would have to follow them. And if they weren't able to block it, that would mean the UN would be forcing them to pull their troops out, or the UN would be forcing them to do this or do that or whatever. They don't want that when it comes to the Security Council. They want the ability to veto, and they probably will be losing it. But going back to what I was saying, this is extremely frustrating. A TV host here in Russia has stated that Mariupol has been cleansed. We have an independent translator who speaks both fluent Ukrainian and Russian here on the channel, so we're able to independently translate what's going on. And this is extremely frustrating. So we're gonna play this. You're not gonna understand it, but we do have the translation afterwards.
Теперь Мариуполь очистился. Ощущение, что вот этими всеми красивостями, мишурой, парками там его осквернили. А теперь, да, через страшное, через ужасное, но он очистился. И это специально делали для мариупольцев. Чем хуже ситуация, тем лучше украшают покойников. Мариуполь теперь.
So what is she going on about? What is this old lady going on about? Well, I can tell you what she's going on about. Quote, Mariupol has been cleansed. All of those beautiful streets, parks, etc. have desecrated the city. The destruction has brought its dignity back. It has been purposefully cleansed with these horrors. The worse the situation is, the more dignified the dead are. I'm going to let that sink in. I want you to guess who else had very similar rhetoric to this. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. The National Socialist Party of Workers' Party of Germany. Also known as the Nazi Party. While they were committing genocide. Let that sink in. Genocide. What is genocide? What is genocide in ethnic cleansing? There are two levels of what you can consider war crimes. War crimes are perpetrated by an individual or a small group in a random act of violence that violates the Geneva Conventions and or their protocols or customary international humanitarian law. That is what a war crime is. What happens when a war crime becomes systematic, meaning that it is done intentionally in a large scale with backing from authoritarian positions and authoritarian orders or authority orders on these that becomes systematic, and that moves into a crime against humanity. You can see prosecutions of crimes against humanity throughout the world. In fact, one just happened, I believe, regarding the Rwandan genocide, in which someone was found guilty of crimes against humanity. I think the individual was 78 years old. He was part of the Houthi. The Hutus, yeah, the Hutu, and he was found guilty by the ICC. But when something becomes systematic, that's very hard to determine. That you have to determine that it was purposeful and systematic. The destruction of Mariupol is systematic. There are a lot of reasons why everything that happened in Mariupol you can put a circle around the whole incident of Mariupol and call it a war crime, or a crime against humanity. The reason being is under Protocol 1 of the 1948 Geneva Convention, which is the fourth Geneva Conventions. A military commander or a commander on the ground is required to, when they're conducting their operational risk assessments and conducting their operational planning, they have to be thoughtful of not only the process but the munitions being used in order to mitigate civilian casualties. We know that this didn't occur because Russia used their grad systems in quite large quantity in order to flatten Mariupol to the ground. 90% of the city has been effectively completely destroyed by the offensive that took place there, meaning that if the building isn't already leveled, it will have to be leveled and completely rebuilt in order for there to even be a city left. Mariupol is effectively completely destroyed and off the map, quite literally. And so grad systems are, the way that they work, they fire 40 122 millimeter Katyusha rockets. These are dumbfire rockets. They simply set to the range that they need to. They fire these rockets, which burn for, X amount period of time until they reach their intended target, and they saturate an area with explosives, high explosives, and shrapnel. This is how grad systems work, and we know that Ukraine, especially RT and RZ inside of Ukraine, actually film these and use them as propaganda campaigns as they were firing on Mariupol with flags waving in the wind and the whole 9 yards. We also see the systematic destruction, the purposeful destruction of civilian residential infrastructure. We see massive amounts of, we even see usage of incendiary munitions at the end of the Azovstal. We see incendiary munitions being used in a highly populated, highly concentrated civilian populated area, which is Mariupol itself. Those are being used. That violates international customary humanitarian law. That also violates the Geneva Convention, the third protocol of the Geneva Convention, which was accepted in 1980. And you continue to see that throughout this war. I mean, Mariupol is just one of many, 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 many instances. Pillaging is also a war crime. Pillaging of personal property and property of the state is a war crime. So when you're talking about pillaging, anytime we're talking about stealing Ukrainian grain, that is pillaging. Anytime you're seeing, tanks that are completely loaded with a bunch of things like Disney blankets, that's pillaging. And that is a war crime. And the amount that has been done shows that it is systematic. Not only that, but when you're talking about ships that are taking Ukrainian grain, or they are being loaded with steel out of the port of Mariupol, these giant steel coils, these are being escorted and brought in by Russian naval forces. They're being escorted for protection by Russian naval forces throughout this entire region. That's systematic. That requires coordination on the part of the government. Firing missiles into Kharkiv, it's no longer strategically viable. It's using inaccurate weapon systems in the high civilian concentrations. There is no risk factor mitigation in that. That is a war crime based off of Protocol 1 of the Geneva Convention and off of the 1941 Geneva Conventions themselves. So that is why it's a crime. It's a crimes against humanity. And crimes against humanity involve most of the time two major things. And that is ethnic cleansing, which means that, in a very oversimplified term, ethnic cleansing is where you kill a people, a specific targeted group of people. In this case, it would be Ukrainians, in order to repopulate an area with your own nationality or language or religion or whatever. But you do not prevent the escape of those individuals, meaning that you drive them out of the area, you will kill them, you burn their homes, you all do all this stuff, but you don't trap them in there. And that is you don't trap them inside of this area, prevent them to escape in order to exterminate them. You just want them out of an area, and you'll do whatever it takes to push this specific group of individuals based off of whatever criteria out of an area to repopulate it with your own ideology or ethnicity or whatever. genocide is really only different from ethnic cleansing by the fact that you trap them and you exterminate them. And we can, to an extent, see this, and we'll get into more of this. We're talking about the heavy amounts of besieging that has been done, but when you also talk about filtration camp and filtration point systems, when you talk about forced deportation, when you talk about the systematic rape and beating and everything else that's happening within this region, that lends it more to a crimes against humanity, and that's reflected in Amnesty International reports. That's reflected in the OSCE's report, which only took 3 weeks to do. That's reflected in that. We see that coming from the High Commissioner of the UN Human Rights Council. We see that coming out of the ECHR, which is the European Court of Human Rights. We see that repeatedly, and I mean repeatedly. In fact, we even see this today at the International Criminal Court, where all the delegations came in support of Ukraine and went to the International Criminal Court and discussed how to move forward with the prosecutions once the war is over. But saying this kind of stuff continues only to lend to that credibility that is the point. That genocide or ethnic cleansing, a crime against humanity, is the point of what is happening. And the rhetoric concerning these are state-sponsored media channels, because there is no independent media, once again, inside of Russia. This is where it continues to lend itself to the fact and the reality that this is not just a war, this is a genocide or an ethnic cleansing of a people. And that is where the argument is coming in. Feel free to be hotly debated, but that is the sad reality, because there comes a point where something is no longer just a tragedy. It is now a war crime, and it is now a crime against humanity. Beginning of the war, we could say the very beginning of the war, we could say that this is a tragedy that this is happening. Day 140 after watching Bucha, Irpin, Hostomel, Borodyanka, Mariupol, we're seeing Slavyansk and Kramatorsk now, Kremenchuk, Zaporizhzhia, Kharkiv, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk. There comes a point where it's not a tragedy anymore. You exceed the point where it's a tragedy, and a tragedy is, this is a reason why we don't fight wars in the 21st century. Going past that is, this is now, this is no longer just a reason not to have a war in the 21st century. This is now a crime against humanity. This is people purposely killing innocent people just to do it for their own nefarious purposes, whatever that may be. You can go over here. This is in Elektrostal, and this guy is either drunk or high, and he has a rifle, and he's claiming that he came back from Ukraine, threatening people on the street here. Quote, I came from Ukraine, fuck, they shot me there, the man screams as he confronts another man, and a bypassing woman is attempting to stop him.
Мы вам мешаем чем-то? Сейчас уйдем. Давайте, сейчас уйдем. Не-не-не, мужчина! Мужчина, ты жить хочешь? Мужчина! Ты жить хочешь? Мы все хотим жить. Все хотите? Мы сейчас уйдем. Я тебя башню не надо, не надо. Ну вы что шутите? Иди нахуй. Сука, мужчина! Я недавно, блядь, с Украины приехал, падла, блядь. Меня там расстреляли, нахуй. Мужчина! Я, блядь, недавно с Украины приехал. Ты видел, стоит, нахуй? Вертолет-то, нахуй. Вертолет, видел, стоят, нахуй? Видел, стоят? Вот, пошли, я тебе покажу, нахуй. Пошли.
Пора, наверное, полицию вызывать.
Пошли. Ну, Кость, Костя, блядь, ну у нас ребенок, Кость.
Пацанки, пошли. Пошли.
Дим, а вы мне говорите,
У меня сын погиб нам. И что, ты взял ружье? Меня стреляешь? Пошли, брат, пошли. Я верю тебе.
Either way, I think, regardless of what happened, he needs help, to say the least. Now, I do know why some of those claims regarding destroyed HIMARS in Ukraine may be occurring, and that's because coming out of here in Dagestan, the Russian military is apparently putting incentives, or at least this local government is putting incentives on the table to try and get people to enlist. This comes as Russia is having major manpower shortages there on the front lines within Ukraine, and according to them, this is out of the Antonisk village here, according to their Telegram channel. And they said that that they are willing to, if you capture an American jet or HIMARS system, if you capture a HIMARS system, you're entitled to 1 million rubles, which is roughly $17,000. Not enough for me to do it. For the destruction of HIMARS or Tochka U rocket launcher or an aircraft, 300,000 rubles, and the destruction of a tank, 100,000 rubles, and so on and so forth. These new laws are coming out of the commissariat here and anyone can sign a military contract that's under 50 years of age. Fortunately, this has been rather difficult to verify, but it is a possibility, especially it would lend credibility to, one, due to the manpower shortages, the incentives, and two, it would also lead credibility as to why there is so much Russian chatter about being destroyed HIMARS, considering outside of their destruction of civilian of quote-unquote civilian infrastructure inside of Ukraine, HIMARS aren't really talked about to any extent or causing major losses to Russian forces, at least in the Russian Federation mindset. And we see that reflected in their news channels such as RT, TASS, and RIA Novosti. Over here, we take a look at Georgia. The EU Commission has postponed the consideration of the status of Georgia's EU candidacy. This is an assessment of the progress regarding reforms ongoing in Georgia, which must be carried out in order to maintain this, in order to obtain the status of being an EU candidate, which will be made no earlier than 2023. The representative of the European Commission has stated that today. The opposition of Georgia called today to convene an extraordinary session of Parliament to discuss the reforms. The government, or the people of the government, are not very happy with their own government. There's a lot. Russia still has a lot of oligarchies, or oligarchs. They still have a lot of things that corruption and a lot of substantial issues. Whereas Ukraine has shown, at least in some way, shape, or form, good faith efforts in order to reform many of these and continue to do so. Georgia simply has not, and has not put in any substantial changes in order to improve their democracy, essentially, and that is why the EU has turned down their candidacy thus far and will not review it until 2023. We're going to jump up here real quick. This is in Lithuania. The EU Commission has partially given in to the to Russia regarding the Kaliningrad transit issue. The reason being is that it was causing a lot of escalation of tensions within this region. The EU is going to allow the transit of sanctioned goods by rail, with military goods being excluded from that list to Kaliningrad. However, the sanctions will remain in standing when it comes to road transit. So if they're trying to truck it through Lithuania, that will no longer fly as long as it has to come in via rail. Over here in Germany, Russia has cut in Germany's Nord Stream 1 gas supply. It's a 3-day, is currently sitting at day 3 of a planned 10 to 12 day outage. However, Russia is currently hinting that it may be longer. It's currently a planned response in coordination, in retaliation, I should say, due to Canada's delay in returning a turbine that was repaired. Justin Trudeau, who's the Prime Minister of Canada, has stated that they will be returning those Nord Stream 1 turbines back now that they are fully repaired. And you can see the immense drop here in Nord Stream 1 on an inflow into Germany. And this is, this only should emphasize the fact that Russia is willing to use, gas and stuff like that as a means of political, of getting political leverage for what they want. And this is exactly why Europe is trying to, cut off any ties they can with Russia. This only proves the fact that Western countries are rightful to fear this happening. It's not the only thing. Germany has also released a list of weaponry and equipment that they will be transferring to Ukraine, to include 53,000 rounds of anti-aircraft ammunition, 8 mobile ground radars with thermal imaging devices, 3 self-propelled artillery howitzers, the 155s or the PHZ 2000s, 4,000 rounds of other anti-aircraft munitions, 10 plus 10 optional autonomous surface drones, 14 tractors and 14 semi-trailers, 2 tractors and 4 trailers, 43 reconnaissance drones, 1 high-frequency device with equipped, 10 protected cars or armored cars, 7 jammers and 8 electronic anti-drone devices, 4 mobile, remotely controlled and protected demining devices, 65 refrigerators for medicines, 1 vehicle decontamination point, 54 armored personnel carriers, the M113 variant with weapons systems from Denmark and transferred. And transfer is being financed by Germany. 30 Leopard anti-aircraft platforms with 6,000 anti-aircraft rounds of munitions. Air defense systems such as the IRIS-T SLM, the Cobra artillery detection radar, 80 pickup trucks, 3 multiple rocket launch systems or HIMARS, or the M270s is what they would have, 100,000 first aid kits, and 3 armored recovery vehicles. Wow. That is a drastic turnaround. We've talked a lot about Germany, and I've given some personal thoughts on Germany's, what Germany's been doing so far, and I do give them some leeway, considering Germany has been a pacifist country since it was utterly demolished during World War II, and immediately 20 years earlier, World War I. So they are very pacifist, and they have been for a long time. It's been very difficult for them to change that mindset, but this war has definitely done so, and we've seen a dramatic increase in support for Ukraine following Chancellor Olaf Scholz's visit to Bucha and to Ukraine itself when he was there about a month ago. There's a very drastic change, I think, from a lot of European leaders once that happened. We started seeing immediately, within days, additional support already heading to the front lines into Ukraine from Germany. As we jump down here into Istanbul, there's a rather large bit of international news tonight coming out of this. We've talked about for some time now the pillaging of Ukrainian grain and the blockading of the ports that's causing a global food shortage that may have been alleviated tonight. And that's because here, Russia has agreed to provide a grain corridor for food exports out of Ukraine. This is amongst Ukraine, Russia, the United Nations, and Turkey all holding talks. These talks went on for several hours longer than they were intended to, as they tried to come to an agreement. Turkey, which has been, kind of controversial regarding its standpoint, especially alongside the rest of its NATO allies, seems to have won a couple of political points here as being relatively neutral despite being part of NATO in the conflict. They are now going to maintain as the intermediary between Russia and Ukraine, and they are going to be facilitating these corridors and they are going to be running the whole show regarding them. Russia is designed to resume Black Sea grain exports with the ease of risk the starvation facing millions. Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar said the agreement would be signed next week, and said Ankara will ensure the safety of shipments in transit, and parties will jointly check grain cargoes and ports. But UN Chief Antonio Guterres said more work needed to be done before a deal was signed. But there we go. There's a picture from that deal as everyone's trying to come together and make this thing work. And That's big news. That is huge news. That is a ton of, a lot of grain from Ukraine. Ukraine is the breadbasket of the world, and a lot of that grain gets used for humanitarian aid. This is going to go right back into Ukraine to help internally displaced peoples, to help people, that are refugees that have seek shelter elsewhere. The Horn of Africa that has been suffering rather immensely under the worst drought in 40 years. Those people have had to have their rations cut. They could have their rations, brought back up to, to significant portions again. That's millions of children that are no longer affected. Collateral hunger. We talked about this in another episode, where actually we didn't talk about this. The World Food Program, which is run by the United Nations, did, and they had a whole video on that. And I highly encourage that you look up what collateral hunger is and its causes. But this is huge. This is major when it comes to, trying to protect, people and save people from quite literal starvation and severe malnutrition across the globe. Jump down here into Idlib as we move into the Middle East, where a Russian strike hit an underground workshop. It's a video of Russian aerospace forces, or the Russian Air Force, striking underground fortification of terrorists in the Syrian province of Idlib. It appeared and has appeared on the network. During the raid, a cache of weapons and equipment of militants, as well as a workshop that produced UAVs, was destroyed. This is the second day in a row, which we've covered, the Russian forces striking Idlib itself. Needless to say, I do not think that those guys survived. This is rather intense. This is a rather intense bombing mission. But this kind of terrain really gives you an idea of just the immense power of some of the ordnance that's being dropped. And these are the exact same types of ordnance that are being dropped in Ukraine, too. When we talk about 2,000-pound bombs, or the 500-kilogram bombs, that are being used by the Russian Federation, like the Fab 500, these munitions are huge. They're massive, and you feel it when they're going off near you. The perfect meme, I think, for this would be, that's a lot of damage. I don't think flex tape's going to fix that. As you jump over here into northern Pakistan, we can see where Pakistani security forces neutralized several militants of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is the Pakistani Taliban. That's just we just call them the TTP. They're different than the Afghani Taliban, believe it or not. But they did kill 10 militants of the TTP. This is despite this happened in North Waziristan district. This is despite the fact that they had reached a relative peace agreement to an extent. There still seems to be some issues there. The security forces received whereabouts regarding the terrorists, and the military was launched a search operation. Having found the militants, they engaged in a firefight where 6 of them were killed. A second skirmish took place near the border of Afghanistan, in which they had entered Pakistan, and during that shootout, 4 terrorists were also killed at that location. The military seized weapons and equipment off of the militants themselves. As we jump down here into Sri Lanka, there's been some pretty major developments within the country over the last 48 hours. And the major thing that happened today, the president of Pakistan was expected to resign today. He did not effectively resign. He fled the country. He fled to the Maldives, and then he put the prime minister in charge as acting president. and the people are very, very, very unhappy. Shots have been fired at the presidential palace and the prime minister's residence. They are currently engaging, essentially, it's a revolution. They're immediately demanding the resignation of the current acting president or the prime minister. The speaker, the parliamentary speaker, said said that he had been phoned and told him his resignation letter would arrive today. So that didn't happen. He just left. So he flew to the Maldives. He was denied from his initial location. His initial location that he was supposed to go seek political asylum for was actually Dubai. That didn't happen.
Come backside. Come backside. मेरे पीछे रहिए. चल चल चल.
Needless to say, there's been a lot of issues regarding this, and that's what's currently happening here inside of the country of Sri Lanka. But yeah, the government is pretty much collapsed at this point. They don't realistically have one anymore. And they are in the worst economic crisis that they've ever been in since they gained independence in 1948. We jump up here into Pyongyang. We jump up here into Pyongyang, which is in North Korea, as North Korea has recognized the DNR and the LNR as independent republics. This would be yet another nation to support this. The other one would have been Syria and Belarus. In response, of course, Ukraine has cut off all diplomatic relations with North Korea. Not that I would assume there was a lot there to begin with. But yeah, considering North Korea agrees with Russia, yeah, guys, I think you screwed up. North Korea agrees with you. There's not a whole lot North Korea would agree with, but they agree with you. As we jump over here into Africa, the Islamic State has claimed 2 separate attacks which occurred here in Mozambique, more specifically here in the Cabo Delgado province and near Palma. They published photos of a trophy captured after one of the attacks on an army barracks in the Palma district located near Tanzania. A massive amount of weapons and ammunition. Basically, here it's not like the coalitions fighting the Islamic State in the Middle East. The Islamic State here has a lot more power and control simply because of the political instability within these countries that already pre-existed prior to their formation. And we already can see the ramifications here as these governments their military is a lot less funded, much more ill-equipped and ill-trained, and currently the Western support for these countries is trying to catch up. There are missions currently ongoing inside of Africa, to try and assist and train and advise and assist these forces on how to properly operate and employ themselves against counterinsurgency and counterterrorism operations. But simply, it's going to take some time before we see any ramifications coming out of that. In the meantime, the groups already have some rather large backings. We can see Al-Shabaab up in Somalia. We can see the Islamic State operating pretty much everywhere in Africa, as well as many rebel and militant groups, JNIM, which is Al-Qaeda affiliated as well, Boko Haram, which is affiliated and aligned with the Islamic State. We see a magnitude of groups operating all over Africa, causing additional political instability and also more terrorism. We jump up here into Miami here in North America, where the Florida man has struck again. So this is a new flight of Florida man. This story we originally posted back on April 22nd, and this is a pilot in Florida who flies a banner. And it says Putin Julio, which in Ukrainian roughly translates to Putin is a dickhead. And he once again flew another banner. So we have the original post that we made here. Ooh. I think it may have been deleted. That's unfortunate. Well, we had the original flight there, folks. I am sorry about that. But we do have the new flight here for you. He has expanded his banner.
На пляже. Моя дочка. Моя дочка. Вот папа. Вот самолет. Идем растяжку.
Nice, Florida man. Get some, Florida man. I'm glad that even Florida is pitching in on this. As we see here, inflation has hit a 20-year high in the United States. Inflation has officially reached 9.1% in the last 12 months as U.S. consumer prices continue to skyrocket across the country. Luckily, over the last 3 weeks, at least for gas, those prices have seemed to have gone down at least a few cents nationwide. But the ramifications of what's happening here regarding inflation and consumer prices across the globe as a result of sanctions that are already being built on top of the already struggling logistical system that occurred thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic. Those are just kind of building on top of each other and kind of making the perfect storm for, worldwide global recessions, essentially, in economies. We can go ahead and take a look at this here. You can see the U.S. inflation rate here since January of 1980. It's not the only thing coming out of Washington, D.C. The U.S. State Department has released an official statement as of 9:30 this morning Eastern Time regarding the use of filtration cans and detainment and forceful deportation of Ukrainian nationals inside of Russia. This is their official statement. This is coming from Antony Blinken, who is the Secretary of State for the United States, and he has stated, on the eve of the Ukraine Accountability Conference, the United States calls on Russia to immediately halt its systematic filtration operations and forced deportations of Russian-controlled and held areas of Ukraine. The unlawful transfer and deportation of protected persons is a grave breach of the Fourth Geneva Convention on the protection of civilians and is a war crime. Russian authorities must release those detained and allow Ukrainian citizens forcibly removed or coerced into leaving their country the ability to promptly and safely return home. We call on Russia to provide outside independent observers access to so-called filtration facilities to deport or to force deportation relocation areas in Russia. Estimates from a variety of sources, including the Russian government, indicate that Russian authorities have interrogated, detained, and forcefully deported between 900,000 and 1.6 million Ukrainian citizens, including 260,000 children from their homes to Russia, often to isolated regions in the Far East. Moscow's actions appear premeditated and draw immediate historical comparison to Russian filtration operations in Chechnya and other areas. President Putin's filtration operations are separating families, confiscating Ukrainian passports, and issuing Russian passports in an apparent effort to change the demographic makeup of parts of Ukraine. Reports also indicate Russian authorities are deliberately separating Ukrainian children from their parents and abducting others from orphanages before putting them up for adoption inside of Russia. Eyewitnesses and survivors of filtration operations, detentions, and forced deportations report frequent threats, harassment, and incidents of torture by Russian security forces. During this process, Russian authorities have reportedly capture and store biometric and personal data, subject civilians to invasive searches and interrogations to coerce Ukrainian citizens into signing agreements to stay in Russia, hindering their ability to freely return home. Evidence is mounting that Russian authorities are also reportedly detaining and disappearing thousands of Ukrainian citizens or civilians who do not pass filtration. Those detained or filtered out include Ukrainians deemed threatening because of their potential affiliation with the Ukrainian army, territorial defense forces, media, government, and civil society groups. Eyewitnesses, survivors, and Ukraine's general prosecutor have reported that Russian authorities have transported tens of thousands of people to detention facilities inside Russian-controlled Donetsk, where many are reportedly tortured. There are reports that some individuals targeted for filtration have been summarily executed, consistent with the evidence of Russian atrocities committed in Bucha, Mariupol, and other locations in Ukraine. President Putin and his government will not be able to engage in these systematic abuses with impunity. Accountability is imperative. This is why we are supporting Ukrainian and international authorities' efforts to collect, document, and preserve evidence of atrocities. Together, we are dedicated to holding the perpetrators of war crimes and other atrocities accountable. The United States and our partners will not be silent. Ukraine and its citizens deserve justice. So that is the full statement coming directly from the State Department of the United States regarding filtration camps. So we've talked about the usage of filtration camps before. I highly encourage you, if you do not know what a filtration point or a filtration camp is, to please go look up their usage during the First and the Second Chechen Wars. It's a concentration camp. That's all filtration is. The filtration point is. It's just a concentration camp. Or the isolation colony, also known as penal colony number 52. As we jump into some much more light-hearted news here, we can see that Roman gold was discovered inside of the plowed fields here in the UK. A cache of gold was found buried on a farmland in the United Kingdom that's caught the attention of coin experts that have linked the treasure trove to the Roman Empire thus far. So far, metal detectors have discovered 11 coins in a remote stretch of cultivated field located in Norfolk. Experts remain hopeful that more can be unearthed here in the near future. Adrian Marsden, who is a numismatist at the Norfolk County Council, dated the exceptional bounty of gold coins to sometime between the 1st century BC and the 1st century AD. Interestingly, all of the coins were minted before the Roman conquest, when Britain became occupied by Roman forces, starting in AD 43 after an invasion launched by Rome's 4th emperor Claudius. According to Marsden's estimate, the gold coins together are valued at approximately £20,000 or $250,000 USD. The British Museum recently acquired the coins as part of its permanent collection. And take a look here. So these are cool. These are really cool. Britain's history with the Roman conquest and everything. That's a pretty cool part of history if you've ever read about it. I know a little bit, not a lot. Like, London was actually before the Romans, and the Romans actually just had an agreement with London. Londinium, I think, is what it was back then. London itself, like the city of London inside of London, is like amazing in history alone. It's fascinating. And so is, like, they still have guilds. Like, it's wild, but it's the conquest of the Roman conquest of Britain is a very interesting part of history, and it really that's really the pinnacle of Rome in reaching its furthest expanses. It didn't. What was after they had completed their conquest and built their walls, they really didn't expand any further after that point, and from then on, the Roman Empire only became weaker. It's not the only Roman thing we have here. A sanctuary used by Roman soldiers nearly 2,000 years ago was found. This is one of the most extensive ancient Roman temple complexes in northern Europe, and it's been unearthed here right in the Netherlands, and 1st century AD site. Also, it's known as a temple sanctuary and was located near the fork of the Rhine and the Wall rivers. It's a short walk from Roman forts along the lower German lines, which was then the northernmost border of the empire at this point in time. The sanctuary consists of at least 3 large temples and many smaller altars dedicated to particular Roman gods and goddesses, and would have been mainly used for sacred vows by Roman soldiers stationed at the nearby forts. Hundreds of artifacts have been found at the site, including coins and jewelry, while the tips of spears and lances and the remains of armor and horse harnesses emphasize its military nature. These discoveries give a glimpse into the lives of the soldiers actually stationed here at the frontiers of the empire, far from the Roman heartlands. You can take a look at some of the stuff that they're digging up here. This is pretty cool too. So the Romans inside of actual Europe, I don't know a whole lot about. I do know that the Roman arrival inside of most of Europe is what pushed the Celts over into, or the Celtic and Gallic people out of Central Europe and further into basically crossing the Channel into the UK. Whereas now the UK, and now that's where you get the Celtic Scottish and the Irish. Those 2 locations are not the homelands of the Celts. The Celts actually come from Western and Central Europe. So, pretty fascinating. All of this stuff is immensely fascinating. A lot of cool Roman stuff. I never get to see a lot of Roman stuff. It is a fascinating part of history. I just unfortunately never studied a whole lot about. But pretty amazing overall. But that is actually it for all the news inside of the world today. That's everything. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed thus far. I hope that I answered any questions or any comments that you guys may have had pretty well, and try to explain things in an understandable way. I hope that you guys have enjoyed, however, and I hope that you guys are joyous in the fact that the grain should be flowing out of Ukraine rather soon in several different capacities, and that things are kind of looking on the up and up. But overall, there is still a ton of bad things happening throughout the world. There's a lot of pretty depressing stuff to talk about in the news. That's usually what makes the news. But luckily, you guys have made this an awesome community where we can help. And that's because you guys are able to make this be the news that can give back, which is the whole point of this project. We're never doing super chats. We're never pushing merchandise, ever. All of this stuff is going 100% towards charities. Everything we do here is about charities. We're all volunteering our time. Also, on that side note, please make sure to give a huge thanks to the staff team who actually make this happen. They are the ones that are doing all the research and putting this stuff together. I simply lend my voice and put dots in a map. But they're amazing. They make this happen. They verify everything. They translate. It's amazing. And but they, you guys allow us to do this. You allow us, we're all volunteering our time to do this. And we want to be able to make sure that everything goes for charity. So make sure to check out the video description below and check out all the charities that we have linked down there. There are a ton of them. A lot of them are for Ukraine, but there are also other locations of the world that aren't nearly as highlighted as Ukraine is in the current mindset. So I please implore you to check those out, especially as they simply aren't getting the love and affection that they probably should be as charities, as millions of people are being affected worldwide. If you have any more, please reach out to a staff member on our Discord. The link is also in the description. And you can please send us a link in a small description. We're currently going through and vetting several at this point in time, including one for the United States. So we're currently working on some of that too. So please be sure to check out all of those and to give us more. We're always looking for more. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, let your friends know about us. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. It really helps us out here at the channel. It allows us to reach more people, and the more people we can reach overall, the more good we can do, because the more people that will be here to support this very effort, and of course the more people that will be here to enjoy the news. So please Please continue to support these organizations. That's the whole point of this channel. We hope to one day be able to put fundraisers directly onto the stream on every single stream that we do every single night. So thank you once again for supporting those organizations. I can't thank you enough for that, and I also can't thank you enough for supporting the channel itself. Thank you guys all for joining us. My name is Paul from the New News, and have a wonderful rest of your night. Have a wonderful Thursday, and we will see you tomorrow once again at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. Have a great one, guys.